Well, hey guys, thanks very much for tuning in today. I am very excited to be able to talk to the writer-director of the film Speak, which I covered on my first new Overlooked segment. I haven't done that in a long time, but the quarantine and everything is the perfect time to start talking about movies like that you guys can watch. And I'm sitting here with Jessica Sharzer. She's a writer. She's recently written the film A Simple Favor. She wrote the screenplay for the movie Nerve, and this was her writer and director debut. So thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I think this movie's very special. I don't see a lot of movies that feel this real. Some of it, for me, could be the fact that I'm from the Midwest as well, being in Ohio, and there's just something that seems very realistic about the movie. But I'm curious how this project came to be, because as I was researching the film, it was hard to find info about it. There was little tidbits here and there, but not that much. And I'd love to be able to provide fans of the movie sort of a making of experience coming from the person who actually made it. So could you talk a little bit about how you came across it?
So first of all, it was a long time ago, but I will talk about everything I can remember. And I do remember a lot because it was very meaningful to me. So the way it happened was I was in film school at NYU. I went to grad film over there. And I had a short film that did a lot for me, did very well. It won some awards at festivals, and it got me an agent and all of that. And someone at Showtime, who was a junior executive there at the time, had seen the short. And I had what's called a general meeting with her. So it wasn't for any particular project. It was just, hey, how are you? What are you interested in? And then about 6 months after that, she reached out to me and she said, I have this project that I think you might be right for. There was already a script that had been written, and there was obviously this book that had been read in schools, won all kinds of awards for young adult literature. And she sent me both. And I said, which one should I read first? And she said, read the script. And I read the script, and I didn't really get it. I felt like I just didn't understand what was going on in it. And then I thought, well, this book has won a lot of awards. I think I'm going to read the book. So I read the book, and basically I called her back and I said, I really feel like I would want to rewrite the script if I were going to do this. And luckily, Showtime and the producer agreed to that. And we were in a big rush because I got the job in the spring, and then we had to shoot in the summer because we needed kids and we needed schools. And so if you're not shooting in the summer, the cost of shutting down a school and also of paying for tutoring for a cast full of kids would have been prohibitive based on the budget. And the budget was very low. So we had to shoot in the summer, and I got the job maybe in May, and we had to shoot in like July, basically. So it was very fast. And we just made the movie super fast, and we made it for just under $1 million. We brought most of our crew out to Ohio, and we chose Ohio partly because it's a right-to-work state, and so we could have essentially union and non-union crew working together.
That's terrific.
Yeah. And it also was the right look for the film. Some of our crew was coming from Texas and some were coming from New York. So we all met in Ohio. And it was 21 days of shooting. Our lead actress was 13 years old, which means from the time she leaves her hotel until she gets back is 9 hours. And she's in every single scene. So basically what we had to do was find a stand-in for her so that we could keep shooting when she went back to the hotel. So there were certain complications with it, just to made it a little bit more challenging. We had very short days, which was nice for the crew.
I had heard that there was an issue with a flood.
Yes.
Okay. Could you talk a little bit about that?
We shot at a high school, Gahanna High School, in Columbus, Ohio, or outside of Columbus. I think it's in the town of Gahanna. And there was really extreme weather. Given that we were shooting in the summer, we had a hailstorm, we had flooding, we had like a giant downpour. And for some reason, it got into the school. I don't know I can't remember why, because in theory, must have had weather, with the school before. But for some reason, there was flooding. I remember flooding in the halls of the school, which obviously with electric equipment is super dangerous. So we had to completely shut down and clear the set because that's a risk you can't afford to take.
Were there any sequences that you decided to create around this flood or the rain, like
The
use
rain,
what's
yes.
there?
Yeah, the last night we were shooting was actually the flashback to the party where she
Okay.
goes to the party and she meets Andy. So we had her all dressed up in the makeup and the hair, which had taken hours to do. And then it starts raining and the party was set for outside. And it was our last night. So we couldn't basically put off the scene. So it was my choice to shoot the scene in the rain and have them kind of dancing in the rain and celebrating, which did not make the makeup and hair people very happy because they'd worked so hard to create this look for her that was like, boom, done in an instant. But it actually added a lot. It was one of those great moments where you're making a film and you improvise and suddenly it becomes a different scene, but in a better way. It made it very special. It made it very romantic for me, that they were dancing in the rain.
Yeah, and it's funny because watching the movie before hearing anything about flooding or rain, I would never have thought that that was improvised at the last second or made up on the spot, because it feels very natural to what's happening at that point, because the character Melinda, she's experiencing sort of this like pop romance
Yeah,
feeling
exactly.
of euphoria that's supposed to be what everyone experiences when they're young, and in the rain before it's cut short and the horrific event occurs. And so that really just added something to the whole movie, and
Yeah,
that's one of
thank
those
you.
great that's a great experience to me, like whenever a director is on set and there's something about the environment that just changes everything. I
Mhm.
think that's the mark of a good filmmaker, is when they can just instantly reevaluate and come up with something better.
Yeah, well, you have to, especially if the budget is low and the schedule is tight. I mean, like I said, if we could have waited till the next day to shoot, we probably would have, but we
Hmm.
literally, everyone was going home the next day. So that's an example of where low budget filmmaking sometimes forces you to make choices that end up being for the best. Also, the rape scene, I think, was originally scripted to happen in the woods, which is how it happens in the book. And our actress had a huge allergic reaction to the grass. And
Really?
so we set it in the car, which ultimately, again, I really felt was good because she was so trapped. But it wasn't written for that. So, there's ways that you just need to be flexible on set and sort of make the best of what's happening, because there's so many curveballs that come at you in production, and you don't have time to really, at least with low budget filmmaking, to dig your heels in and say, well, I'm going to wait until the rain stops. That just wasn't an option.
Could we talk a little bit about casting?
Sure.
Did you have a say in casting, or
Oh,
was it
yeah.
something?
People weigh in. So you have producers, you have the executives, you had the network and the studio, which I think in this case were the same thing. Sometimes the studio and the network are two different things. So you're going to have executives, all of whom have an opinion. Now, what you have is called casting executives. So I'm working on casting a show right now, and you've got casting executives that are literally, that's a full-time job at the studio, and they are looking at hundreds of actors trying to help you find the perfect person who's both available, right for it, interesting, has some kind of potentially has some kind of following. But yeah, no, I was very involved in the casting, and it was a real process to find those kids.
Had you seen Panic Room at this point? Because I believe Kristen Stewart was
Yeah.
coming off of Panic Room right before, or shooting
She
Speed.
actually had just finished shooting a movie called Catch That Kid, which
Oh
hadn't
yeah,
come out yet.
yeah.
She had just wrapped that movie, and she had done Panic Room, which I had seen. She did that when she was 9, so it had been a few years since Panic Room. So I had definitely seen her in that. I thought she was fantastic. But the truth is, what really blew me away was meeting her and seeing what she did in an audition. And she was only 13 at the time, but she showed up to the first meeting with her script completely dog-eared with notes on every single page. And she had the book, which had notes on every single page. Like she had really, and she didn't even have the job yet, she had really thought about everything. And I was so amazed by that because none of the other actors showed up like that with that level of, but she's a very serious person and she's a very deep thinker. She has that movie star quality, which I think very few people have, which is that you can read her thoughts on screen, which is a very, very unique gift and ability. And I don't even think you can teach it or direct it. I think people either have it or they don't. And it's some quality, it's hard, it's a lot in the eyes, but it's some quality that certain actors have, and that's why they work all the time, because you really can connect to them instantly and what they're feeling.
She's wonderful. I also really loved Steve Zahn in the film. I thought that was a very interesting choice for the art teacher, because I love him in Shattered Glass. He plays a very serious role in that film. Joyride, he's serious, but he is just such a likable presence in movies, and he's kind of like inherently goofy sometimes that I didn't necessarily, the first time I saw him, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And it kind of, I was asking the film to sell me on it, kind of, because I'm just not used to that. But he really did. Like, when I was in school, my favorite course was always art. Art was always very easy for me. It was like that 45-minute period where I was just completely relaxed, had no concerns, anxieties. And so I really related to that aspect of this movie, that she goes to this one class and sort of blossoms there and experiences all of these, new talents. And there was something about him that he strides that line of being like that cliche art guy who's just like free and spirited, but it never comes off that way. Like, he's very good in the movie. Can you talk a little bit about working with him?
Well, it was funny because he and I were at the same agency, so I had kind of a way to get to him. Now, he initially said no to the role. And the reason he said no is because he was coming off of another movie. He had been away from his family for several months shooting a different movie, and he really wanted to go home, which is completely, understandable. Yeah. All we needed him for was, I think, 4 days maybe to shoot all of his scenes. It was like less than a week. And so I asked the agent, can I just talk to him on the phone? And I knew I had one chance to try to talk him into it. And I was really dead set on him. I don't know why, but I had it in my head, like, he's the only guy who can play the role. And so I got him on the phone. He was super nice. He's actually really that nice guy that you see in the movie in real life.
Good.
He was super nice. And he was, didn't want to like cave on it. And I said to him, when you're in high school, you have that one teacher who makes all the difference, that one teacher who changes everything for you. For me, it was my English teacher who told me that I was a good writer. And that guy literally changed my life, whether he knows it or not. You move on, and that person may or may not know how they've, impacted your life. And I said to him, and you're that guy in this movie. You're the guy who literally gives this girl, a new lease on life. And he got really quiet. And then he said, okay, I'll do it. And then he came to Ohio, and he actually came out 3 days early to rehearse with Kristen. That was his choice. I did not ask him to do that. I was so happy he wanted to do that, but it was completely his idea. He was like, I'm going to come out early. I'm going to work with her. And sometimes you get the most amazing people who are genuinely good people in addition to being as talented as they are. And he's really one of those people. That's
so good to hear, because I've always liked him, and I don't think he gets enough work. I think he's really, really, really good. But there's a scene towards the end of the movie, and just in case my viewers haven't watched the film, this is spoiler warning for you. She goes into this sort of crawl space throughout the movie, and you see her drawing or sculpting, and there's this great scene where she decides to show him her art. And I don't cry in movies. I really don't, but I did. I absolutely cried during that scene, because there was something about the silence of it. There was no dialogue. There was just like a couple lines where he's like, "This is good," but the entirety of that is just the camera panning across the art. There's this great piano music in the background, and then there's just this close-up shot of him, and he's crying, and I'm like, "Oh my God, this is a lot for me right now," because I completely got it. I completely got it.
That's cool.
It was like two artists who are
Hmm.
both broken in various ways, just connecting over their art. They didn't even have to say anything. It was beautiful. I loved it.
Cool. Thank you. I have a funny story about that scene if you want to hear it.
Yeah, please, please.
I mean, it's just so Steve, but we shot the close up of him 4 times. And by the fourth time, he said, "Guys, I'm running out of grandparents." It was so fun. I mean, it's very Steve. It's like his sense of humor. It's like it was just really funny. So every time I see that scene, that's what I remember.
That's great. Something about this movie that I think is very underrated is its cinematography. There's sort of a misconception, I think, that direction is shot structure only. Direction is what you do with the camera, and that's it. People don't talk a lot about how people are positioned in the frame, you know, the beats of a scene, the way people pause, the way they move in and out. There's so much focus on the shot itself and not as much about what's happening within it. There's a few specific shots that, for some reason, really floor me in this movie. There's one flashback shot while she's drawing this bridge that sort of extends into the distance, where you see this bridge and her and her friends are sort of running down it, and there's these big white balls of light from the lights, and it looks very filmic to me. I have a question, and this is entirely just from my own brain, sort of while I was watching the movie. Is that the same bridge that she is walking on after the rape scene?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good.
Partly, by the way, because when you're shooting a 21-day movie, you don't have time to get to another bridge. So that was partly necessity, but it's also, it's the same bridge.
I don't think that is something you would have to make an excuse for, like, oh, I had the same location, because it works. Like, it thematically works, because she's imagining this beautiful moment where her and her friends were happy, and then later it becomes this horrific walk home.
So the guy who shot my film is this guy, Andrei Perec, who I'd been to film school with, and he had shot a bunch of short films for me before that. I think three short films before we did the feature. So we had a really great working relationship and shorthand with each other. And the thing that I think is so brilliant about him is he really loves natural light, and he loves for the cinematography to be very invisible. He doesn't want to say, "I'm here, I'm the cinematographer, look at me now." Like his style in general is very naturalistic. And that, I thought was really good for this movie. He shot like Blue Valentine and Half Nelson, and you can see in those movies similar style, similar aesthetic of just naturalistic shooting style. We shot on 16 millimeter. Let me think for a second. We shot on Super 16. And it was funny because my thesis film, we had shot on 35, he and I. And the thesis film had this incredible look to it. But it was partly because we shot 35, and it was partly because we did this skip bleach process. We did a lot to the film in my thesis. And this one was much more straightforward. Speak was much more straightforward. But it allowed for the performances to be the thing you focus on. You're not focusing so much on what the camera's doing. And that was partly necessity of the budget. We couldn't shoot 35. We just couldn't afford it. But it also was, we just made it a stylistic choice. And it was funny because Elizabeth Perkins, who plays the mom, she's married to a very famous cinematographer, this guy, Julio Macat. And obviously, she's made many movies with many huge directors. And here she comes to this movie, and we're shooting 16 millimeter, and we're not lighting much. It's all daylight. And she came up to me during one of the days she was shooting, and she said, "Is he going to light me?" Because she was not used to not having a big light in her face, because most movies, the actor feels where the lights are, because they're so intense. And that is just not how Andrei shoots.
Could you talk a little bit about Sundance? Because the film had its premiere January 2004 at Sundance, right?
Yeah, it was literally a dream. Being a filmmaker there, I had sort of vowed to myself I wasn't going to go until I had a film there. It could have been a short or a feature, but I really wanted to go as a filmmaker, and I ended up going several times later as just a viewer. It's a different experience when you go as a filmmaker. I mean, they really celebrate filmmakers. And I'm not just talking about the parties and the swag, of which there's a lot, but it's really It's a celebration of filmmaking, and you're there as a filmmaker and you're talking to other filmmakers, and there's a lot of networking. It didn't actually lead to anything for me career-wise in terms of like next projects or anything like that, which I was a little surprised by. But it did. It was just really enriching to like be there and meet all these filmmakers. I'm still friends with a lot of the people that I met there.
Was the plan to always have it go straight to the Showtime network, or were they going to aim for a theatrical distribution at all?
We were hoping to get a theatrical window, which there was like some talk about it, and then the deal didn't come together. And ultimately, the truth is, I think more people saw it on Showtime and Lifetime than would have seen it in a theater. I think if it had had a theatrical life, it would have been one of those movies that plays in 5 cities for a few weeks, and some people see it and a lot of people don't. But I think the upside, and this is something we're seeing a lot now, especially, is when you premiere something on television and it gets that muscle behind it of the advertising and the groundswell around a TV premiere. For a movie like this, families could watch it together. They could talk about it after, especially if people had big reactions to it. There was a rape hotline that we advertised a number for after the movie. They got thousands of calls. And wow. For me, that's so meaningful because honestly, I didn't really make the movie for that purpose. It wasn't meant to be some big PSA. But if it could have that result that people who might not have reached out reached for the phone, even if one person reached for the phone, that's a win. That's a win that is outside of the sort of normal expectations of making a movie. So I'm actually really happy that it had that life.
Good.
And that, and then of course when Twilight happened, it had a whole nother life because suddenly everyone knew who she was. Well, I was thrilled that the author of the book, which by the way, I think the book is a masterpiece. It's a very hard book to adapt, partly because she just doesn't talk, it's all in her head. But the author came to the set, she sat on the set, she came and she and I did Q&As together. We did the commentary on the DVD together and she's really happy with the movie. So to me,
that's great.
That was an amazing coup. To have her feel good about it, because it's so hard when you've written a book to see it adapted. It's never going to be adapted the way that you have it in your head,
Yeah, I had planned to read the book before doing this interview. I'm definitely going to read it before I film my review. If you guys are watching this after the review, I haven't filmed it yet. So, but I ordered it on Amazon like 3 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to the new Amazon schedule, right?
And it hasn't come to my house yet, but I will definitely read it. I can't wait to read it.
She's an amazing writer. I mean, everything she writes becomes bestsellers. She's a very, very successful YA author and the nicest person. Another one like that just turned out to be just a really nice person.
I'm really happy to hear that the people who made this movie had a good time doing it and were, they had a fun time making it and the joy that came from making the film. And because as I watch it, that's how I feel. And so I'm glad that was genuine.
It was so much fun. It was really, we called it like summer camp because we were all relatively young and we were living in dorms at Ohio State University and we were all on top of each other and we were all far from home. So we really spent all of our time together and we just had a blast. It was really fun.
That's wonderful. Well, look, I really, truly appreciate you doing this. I've only done a few interviews on my channel. I'd like to do more of these types of things, and it's really nice that you were able to talk about it. Do you have anything that you're working on right now that you're excited about?
I mean, after many, many years, I'm trying to get back to directing, actually.
That was one of my questions. I was going to ask.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I mean, I never thought it would be this long, but I actually wrote a movie that Killer Films is going to produce. And it's set in New York. It's an erotic thriller. Ironically, I just sent the script to Kristen to see if after all these many years, she might want to work together again.
That'd be great.
We'll see what happens. But it's based on a Japanese novel that I optioned from the 1960s, but it's set modern day in New York. I'm super excited about it. I don't know how the current state of the world and production is going to impact us. I have a feeling it will delay us by quite a lot. I'm working on writing a TV show right now that was supposed to start filming, I think, 2 weeks ago, and obviously that's been delayed. but hopefully we'll start shooting in the next 6 months somewhere, maybe
That's
not
terrific.
in the States.
Yeah.
And then I actually have a movie project at Universal that I wrote for Channing Tatum, which I'm really, really excited about. I've done two projects with him and his company, and it's a romantic comedy. So I think the world is going to need more romantic comedies coming
Yeah.
out of this, and I certainly am going to need them.
People need to laugh.
Yeah. And I'm actually adapting a Hitchcock movie for Paramount and
Oh,
Gal
wow.
Gadot to star in. So
Wow.
yeah, so it's a pretty exciting time. There's a
Yeah.
lot of good stuff going on.
Well, that's great. Thank you again so much for talking to me about this movie, and I can't wait to see what else you do.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to meet you.